Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch. This is the legislative update presented each month by Williamson, Inc., our local Chamber of Commerce. We're delighted to have a bright-eyed crowd here at Columbia State this morning with us, and glad to have our audience from WCTV Channel 3 and from WAKM. We look forward to having a good conversation here that I think everybody will enjoy. Our guests this morning are from the city of Brentwood, Mayor Ray Little, and the city manager, Kirk Bednar. Gentlemen, we're glad to have you with us this morning, and look forward to finding out all the inside about what's going on in Brentwood. The Mayor Little, you were elected, I think, in May as mayor.
Actually, in June.
June, okay, so the election was in, that's correct. The original election was in May, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But tell us a little bit about you. You've been around Brentwood for a while, haven't you?
Yes, my family came to Williamson County in the 1790s, actually, a section of them in Franklin and the other in Brentwood. So didn't always live in Brentwood as a child, but always lived very close. But of course, families had businesses in Brentwood for years, and other family members' businesses in Franklin. So went to public schools here in Williamson County, and pretty much have lived my life here in Brentwood
Right.
and Franklin, both. So
Now, your business is right in the middle of Brentwood, as I recall it.
somewhat, it's on Church Street. We're actually on the edge. In fact, the majority of my property is in Davidson County. So
Is that right?
Yeah. So
Don't
I
tell-
actually wish I could pay Brentwood commercial taxes. So
So do we.
yeah. It would be a little less expensive.
I see. Well, I think I've filled up there a few times as I was passing through Brentwood. And how long have you been there?
Well, we've been at the tire store since 1986. Been in Brentwood operating a business. My grandfather started that in '68, but actually working with automotive and stuff since 1929.
So, but well aware of what's been going on in Brentwood for the last 50 years or so.
Yep, just having a great celebration this year in Brentwood. Had
Yeah.
3 great events: the Golden Gallop, Brent Fest, which we're going to repeat again next summer. It was such a popular event. And then we had our wonderful rendezvous at Ravenswood about 10 days ago, or actually I guess only about 8 days ago. That was a wonderful event. That was a real fun birthday party, so, for the city of Brentwood.
So it was a birthday party.
It was a birthday party.
Cool.
So-
Great. Kirk, you've been city manager now since 2013, I think?
Yeah, that's correct. About 6.5 years.
And you're not originally from Brentwood.
No, my family came to Brentwood about 200 years after Ray's in the mid-1990s. Moved here in the mid-90s, worked for the University of Tennessee for about 5 years, and then came to Brentwood in 2000 as the assistant city manager under Mike Walker, and then was promoted up in January of 2013.
Okay, so the city, Mr. Mayor, has, like you said, just celebrated a 50-year anniversary. Incorporated in 1969. That was a really good year because I graduated from high school. So just to put everything in perspective, folks. And but the reason it was incorporated, I think, was because the original group wanted something different than what they were seeing in other cities. Is that safe to say?
I think the main reason it was incorporated, those who got together to create the incorporation, probably for 2 things. One, I think they were starting to see growth as Nashville was becoming larger and people were moving more out of the city. Because when I was a kid, if people went to Brentwood, they were going to the country. I mean, they would literally say, we're going to the country after church. And so I think those who were there on the front end of the incorporation were striving to have some control on how Brentwood was developed and what was developed and how the commercial areas were done as they were starting to see growth.
Right.
Because in 1962, which is the year I was born, there was 3,000 people in Brentwood. And in 1969, there were still 3,000 people in Brentwood. But by 1971, 72, the population was starting to really increase.
When did Maryland Farms first start developing?
The first building in Maryland Farms, if I remember correct, because we used to walk through the Ward property from my cousin's house on Highly. We would walk up into Brentwood, and as boys would do, you know, mess around, play, throw water balloons, whatever. And so I remember when it was a thoroughbred farm, but I think it was 1979 when you had Maryland Farms 1, Maryland Farms 2, and Maryland Farms 3, and then not long after that you had the Racket Club, but that was it. It was just, you know, of course that was pretty neat and big for Brentwood at that time, but,
Right.
but that was all. It wasn't the larger office park it is now.
So that was part of the realization that Brentwood was getting ready to grow.
Yes.
And now, the one thing that seems to have always endured in my experience and my knowledge of Brentwood is the 1 acre lot commitment. And that seems to be alive and well. I think you deviated from it once, maybe. But that's kind of the difference between Brentwood and a lot of the other surrounding areas.
The 1 acre density is very good. Brentwood's about 90% residential. And some of this was just how things were and where interstate exits were. If you think about it, Concord Road didn't have an exit, I guess, till the early 90s. And I know that's hard to believe now. But your commercial area was right there off Old Hickory Boulevard and right down Franklin Road, which that had been that way, I think, since the 1800s, that little section, the northern commercial area of Brentwood. But in the south, you had Morris Lane, and there were really just a few service stations, and I think there maybe was one little restaurant. But it kind of put the southern area and the northern area as commercial. And the rest of Brentwood is residential, service institutional. And that's a wonderful combination. And it probably was great that it was incorporated in '69 so it could control that. One thing we always have to remember is about 55-60% of our revenue comes from about 5% of our land, and that's our commercial areas. So those need to remain strong, but we want to keep them where they are. Because when you're in the middle of Brentwood, it's all residential or green space. And I think the residents like that just, if nothing else, for the aesthetic beauty, but it also has more of a calming effect when you drive home at night, even though you're in traffic. I will say it is a wonderful gift.
Right.
But the 1 acre density is important. And even when we will put houses on smaller than an acre lot, the overall development generally has much more, to where if you calculate like on our OSRD or OSRD IP, there is more than 1 acre of land there for each residential unit. So
Right. I remember a few things from back in the, I don't remember which decade it was, but and I asked Kirk this question last year when he was with us. I'll ask it to you though, and Kirk, I'll get to you in just a minute.
That's fine.
But really enjoying having a institutional knowledge here, wealth that Mayor Little has. But the conversation was always that Brentwood didn't have enough commercial, that the taxes were going to be impossible to maintain a level tax rate, that they were going to go up because it was mostly residential and there wasn't much commercial. But I think I noticed in something I was reading that you've maintained your tax rate for 30 years without raising it.
it's 29, I think, but yeah,
Wow.
I believe it's 29.
So, and that's because of the health of the commercial
I think
unit?
it comes from several things, and I'll give kudos to our city manager, Kirk Bednar, and his predecessor, Mike Walker. I think we've had great city management. We have fabulous city staff. They seek ways to save the citizens money. Another efficiency our government has in Brentwood is per capita, we operate with a third less employees than most municipalities. And that's a testimony to our staff. Our staff are fabulous. They often will take on more than even one assignment in more than one area. That saves the taxpayers $8 to $12 million a year. So that's a blessing. Long before I was there, so I'm standing on shoulders, but our commission, I think, has been committed to being fiscally responsible. But I also think they've done a really good job of keeping our commercial areas vibrant and good, but doing it at a pace that fits Brentwood.
Right.
I don't like to put what we do in Brentwood on other municipalities because I think we're unique. In fact, I think we're one of the most unique places in the world. But I feel that keeping those commercial areas vibrant are good. My colleague, Commissioner Andrews, out here, he's in the car business too, and so I kind of always have a little saying that if you go 800 RPM, you can't get anywhere. And if you go 8,000 RPM, you'll have to rebuild the engine every 500 miles. They call that NASCAR. So most of us like to stay between about 1,800 and about 3,200 RPM for driving every day. And that's how I feel Brentwood has done it. They've stayed at, we've stayed at a very good, deliberate, steady pace and provide amenities to our citizens. We have great office parks, but still keeping the community 90% residential.
Right. City election, you had two newcomers elected in May, and one of them with us this morning, Nelson Andrews. Glad to have you with us. And we've had a little difficulty deciding on the mayor this time. The May elections resulted in a deadlock, I think. How many times did you vote? 7, I think I saw somewhere. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that, and I'm stepping out here a little bit, Kirk, I'm sure will want to step into politics here, but it appears from a distance that there are two coalitions, more or less, that have somewhat formed, maybe not too far apart, but one that elected you mayor that appears to me to just basically want to continue down the path that Brentwood's gone for many years, and then maybe another group that wants to change something. What do they want to change?
I would say you need to bring them up here and ask them. So, because I think Brentwood's a pretty wonderful place as it is. So, I feel like that there's always, in politics, that there's sometimes going to be two ways of thinking about things. But even on that, if you look at our votes on most items, probably 85-90% of the time I don't want to get Kirk into this, but I would say 85-90% of the time we all 7 agree. There's a lot of unanimous votes. Unlike a lot of legislative bodies, and some of that may be because there's just 7 of us, but I feel we have a very strong governance. 2 individuals I would like to point out who have been great mentors to me through the years is Commissioner Dunn and Commissioner Smithson, Commissioner Ann Dunn and Commissioner Regina Smithson, who've been commissioners for almost 30 years. And you're talking about institutional knowledge. They have that, and they have wisdom. They know how to be appropriate in certain situations. So we're blessed with that over the years. And of course, for many years, we had Commissioner Joe Sweeney that was a commissioner for almost 40 years. And he always provided kind of an anchor and stability and all. So we've had a very good continuous body of commissioners in Brentwood that I think has promoted the stability. And so, and sometimes as commissioners, there are some differences of opinions, but sometimes we both like plaid shirts. They just like red ones, and I like blue ones. So it's not a big gap between us. So.
Right. Does everybody like the new mural? Or is there controversy about that?
No, and I don't know if everybody knows what you're talking about, but and that you would think Brentwood's pretty staid and conservative, but we have a new mural going up in City Park that's got some symbolism throughout the city, and it passed through the Planning Commission. Their big debate was the background color, not even the design of it, which was surprising. So no, it's coming up, and I think it's maybe done either today or so. It looks really good.
Good.
And so it's a little something different. It's a little unique for
Kirk,
Brentwood.
I probably should have laid the groundwork a little bit about the mayor's election before I asked the question a few minutes ago, but tell us the difference between a commissioner form of government and a mayor-alderman.
Yeah, and that is something unique to Brentwood in that our charter is a general law charter passed by the state legislature called City Manager Commission Charter. So if you look at Brentwood and you look at Franklin, the difference there is Mayor Moore is popularly elected. He runs for the seat of mayor and is elected as mayor there. In Brentwood, our commissioners just run at large for commissioners, and then following every election, every other May, the first meeting, or it's supposed to be the first meeting, it wasn't this time, the 7 of them select one of themselves to be mayor for the next 2 years. So our mayor is not popularly elected by the people of Brentwood. He or she is selected from within the commission for a 2-year period.
And some of the coverage I read about the 50-year celebration, the original intent of the founders was to not have a strong mayor that kind of came in and ran things, but to have more of a consensus type government. Is that true of the commissioner, city manager type?
Yeah, generally, again, the theory there is you've got an elected body of policymakers that set the goals, set the direction of the city, but they're all kind of equal. Mm-hmm. There's not one that has a power base stronger than the others. And then you have the administrative side, which is the city manager and the city staff, and they run the day-to-day stuff based upon the direction set for them by the elected officials. And so that's the pure form of city management form of government is that commission manager form of government.
Right.
We've continued that tradition too amongst the commissioners. It's not by law that we don't have a mayor do 2 consecutive terms, but by tradition, the mayor has always rotated. And I think that's been very beneficial to the city and to the commission body as well. So. Right.
The Commissioner Smithson or Mayor Smithson kind of wanted to change that, but you've stayed with the traditional rotation. So.
Well, not actually, because Mayor Bergen was in between, but we've often had a mayor that's, how many times was Joe Sweeney mayor?
Yeah, there have been people that have been mayor more than once, but it's usually not been consecutive.
But not consecutive.
My apologies to Regina Smithson.
kind of go back to the Frank Clements Buford Ellington thing where every 2 years it would switch. So
right.
Tom Lawrence would know about that.
Correct. Back to the 50th anniversary celebration a little bit. Tell us more about that and what the objective was and how'd it go?
Well, I think it was fabulous. We had 3 unique first-time events. We had a great 50th anniversary steering committee, which again, Commissioner Andrews, after he was elected, served on. We had a parade, and even though it was a little rainy that morning, it was well attended and a lot of fun. That was in April. Then we had Brent Fest in the middle of summer, and had several musical acts there, excellent musical acts. And I believe one, Connor Smith, that opened, I just heard he had signed with Valerie Music or Big Machine Music. I think he's 18, 19 years old, went to Brentwood Academy. So we may be saying, "Oh, well, I remember seeing him at Brent Fest about 5 years ago, but he's selling out Wembley now." So, and then of course our rendezvous at Ravenswood, which is one of our jewels, that mansion. It's probably the thing that I'm most happy with as a commissioner, is that we were able to obtain Smith Park when we did, because it's very unique in this day and time. Getting 400 acres that's pristine land, and I will share with you, when you cross that ridge and you walk down those trails, it smells like Brentwood did when I was a kid and when we would go hunting in the mornings. It's wonderful. And when you're back there, you don't even realize that there's an urban area close to you. And then on top of that, the jewel of a antebellum mansion with a rich history. So,
When was that acquired by Brentwood, that land?
When? Question is, when was it acquired?
Yeah.
The deal was struck in late 2010.
If you would hold your questions, we'll let you ask some in a minute, but we want you to be on a mic so everybody can hear. The question again was, when was the Smith Park acquired? And Kirk, I was trying to decide what to do here.
Now, the original 320 acres, the deal was struck in 2010, and then we had an option within 3 years to buy an additional 80 acres, which we exercised that in late 2013.
So far, what has been developed on the Smith Park property, and what is planned?
well, being Brentwood, nothing has been developed on the Smith
Bad
Park.
word. Bad choice of words, sorry.
We, of course, have numerous walking trails. Now have some, like, certain fields for practice fields, not lit fields, but for like rugby and lacrosse and soccer. Brentwood's always strived to have great cooperation with the county school system, and so often they're allowed to use our park fields for their practices, because there's so many different sports and activities that the schools do in this day and time.
Right.
Not like when I was in school, where it was basically football, basketball, baseball, and wrestling and track. And I think maybe when I was at Franklin, while I was there, they got a soccer team, but it wasn't all the lacrosse and rugby and, of course, hockey and all the different ones they have now, volleyball.
Right.
But that's, and beyond that, and some restroom facilities. So.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the property, the front part of the property is crossed by the main line of the CSX Railroad. So we had to spend a significant amount of money just getting infrastructure for access to the park. We had to build a new access road and a bridge over the railroad and parking facilities and a loop road. So again, we have a couple multi-purpose fields, playground, several miles of hiking trails up in the hills there. And that was the goal of the park. It was going to be more of a passive park. And then again, we spent roughly $1 million renovating the Ravenswood Mansion, and that's heavily used now for events by the community, and just about every weekend, every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and lots of weeknights now for events. So, and again, trails in and out, and so it's passive. The back 80, as we call it, which is the second 80 acres that we bought, is up and over the ridge, more back towards the back part of Carriage Hill subdivision. That's more flat and conducive if we so choose to develop some more active athletic facilities back there. But to get there, you've got to build a road up and over the ridge, and so that's more of a longer-term plan.
I see. The big capital project that you got going on now is a new police headquarters. Tell us why you are building a new police headquarters, and what's the vision there?
So you're right. That's we're still getting bids on different phases, but it's going to be somewhere close to $30 million for about a 55,000 square foot building. Right now, all police operations, other than our 2 DEER officers, which are out at the Safety Center East, but all police operations are at City Hall on 5211 Maryland Way. They are split up in about 4 different spots in that building. And for years, that worked okay for us. But as anybody knows, in the last 5 to 7 years, the issue of officer safety and community interaction with the police department has changed dramatically. So with the police department at City Hall, there is no security. All of our officers park in the back in a wide open public parking lot. If someone is arrested in Brentwood, again, we don't have a jail, nobody does, it's the county we all rely on. But if someone's arrested in Brentwood, they're usually brought in the back of our building, right next door to, or right alongside city employees. They're booked, fingerprinted, and usually taken up the public elevator through my office, not literally my office, but right out in front of my office, over to our CID division and questioned before they're taken to Williamson County for jail. So the operations in our buildings, there's just no security, either for our other employees, for the officers themselves. So we had to do something. And we started looking, 30, 40 years out and just realized we had to look at a different facility. We own land on Heritage Way, right next, just north of the county, between the County Rec Center and the Heritage Senior Living Community. So we already had land, which was a plus. And so we just realized we had to do it, and if we're going to do it, let's make sure it is a building that our police department can survive in and grow into in the next 30 or 40 years. So it will include an indoor firing range. Right now, all the municipalities or all the departments in Williamson County share the outdoor range down in Franklin. I think the long-term viability of that range is probably questionable, both from an environmental standpoint in terms of lead and just a use standpoint within the city of Franklin in terms of noise and that. So we felt like we needed to control our own destiny relative to training and those kind of things. It will include a community room that will be our courtroom also. Our 911 dispatch center, which we still maintain, will move down there also. So, again, we own the land, but we chose to build a building at the time when construction costs in Middle Tennessee are as high as they can be. So that timing-wise wasn't great, but we didn't necessarily get to pick the timing because of the situation we were in.
Right.
I think the police headquarters is something that the city's needed for a while, but the timing of it, I think, is excellent. The central location, I think, is going to help. And since we're sitting here at Columbia State University, I'm sure y'all all remember from your college courses, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I remember right, that base was security, because without security and safety, the other things become basically non-entities. And so as we've gone through the community, I will say it's been nothing but support for this. And I've not heard one negative, and many thank y'all for doing that. We appreciate it. Our police are great. I mean, of course, we have an internationally accredited police department and an internationally accredited fire department. There again, our employees and staff are just generally excellent at everything they do, and they strive for that excellence. They constantly try to improve or do something better. And so I can tell you as a commissioner, that is a blessing beyond belief. So thank you.
That certainly, we would all appreciate that in our own communities, and we do. Speaking of services, one of the real assets of Williamson County and Brentwood in particular are the schools. And you all have had a lot of discussions about starting a school district just for the city. The county has, I think, I don't know whether accelerated is the right word, but they've built a new STEM building there at Brentwood High, Brentwood Middle. And you all support the schools to the tune of nearly $250,000 a year of city money to enhance what the kids at the Brentwood schools get. How is that going? What's the vision there for the schools from Mayor Little? And how do you...
You get the next high curveball, I'm sorry.
Do you think the effort to establish a city school district has legs?
No, because as the commission generally does, they thoroughly investigate something, listen to all input from the citizens, and I'm thinking it was a year and a half ago that was voted on. And typically, once the vote's taken, I will say this as a kudo for my fellow commissioners, once the vote's taken and it's decided, generally you go forward. And so, and I also feel that the Williamson County school system is great. I was educated in Williamson County schools. It was a very excellent school system at that time. I know in my preparation for college that my freshman year, I was well prepared for my college courses, and I think that's the ultimate goal of most public schools for the students who are going to college course. The science, technology, engineering, and math building there between the high school and Brentwood Middle School is an excellent addition, something very needed, helped ease some overcrowding. And the county now has on the slate, I think, a total remodel of Brentwood High School by 2023, and somewhere between 2023 and 2026, probably a complete tear down of Brentwood Middle and a total rebuild, which I went to Brentwood Middle, but it was called Northside, in Northside Junior High. And I can tell you, we have our Rotary Pancake Day there every year. And the bathrooms by the band room still look the same they did when I was in 7th grade. So it probably is time, because I'm starting to get old, so I imagine that makes the school building become old. But yeah, I think we have great cooperation. I think, I know for the school system, a lot of times around rezonings, especially if it's a large rezoning, it makes people question. I think the city of Brentwood did the wise thing. They investigated it, but then I think the commission voted, and we've moved forward since then.
Okay, so it's, that issue is pretty much a settled issue, it sounds like then.
To the best of my knowledge, so yes.
Yeah. Kirk, have you got anything to add there?
No, I just say that, obviously, an issue like that could always come back up. I mean, it was talked about, as I understand it, 30 years ago in Brentwood, and obviously came back up again. So it still could, but I think if you look at the facts of what we're talking about in terms of a city school district, I mean, I don't think everybody fully understood that you don't pay less in taxes, you're only going to pay more. And I think there are some cities that have done that in this state, but they had different situations and different quality of schools they were trying to achieve, and to say that you were going to break away from one of the highest achieving school districts in the state and pay more in taxes, I'm not quite sure that would have resonated if it ever got to the point of going to a referendum, which obviously it never got anywhere close to that.
Right. Did you ever see any numbers about how much that would cost?
That was part of the problem. I think we never actually did a quote-unquote feasibility study, but as we talked to the consultants, you might say, and trying to decide, what to do and who to hire, that was a number I don't remember. I don't think they could ever get their hands around it, and they couldn't guarantee getting their hands around it. Even if we did the study, they could tell us the first year, and in Brentwood, we constantly are looking out, well, as with the police station, 30 or 40 years, but it's an ongoing process, our capital improvement plans and our budget. We're always looking out 5 to 7 years, and it's, you might say we have budget season between January and June, but literally it's year-round. I don't think you can be fiscally responsible if you're not just constantly looking at it. So we couldn't get any numbers out.
But by state law, there would have been a minimum 15-cent tax increase on our city tax rate, which is only 36 cents. So you're talking about a minimum 40% increase in the property tax, as required by state law, just for local contribution.
Okay. Let's talk about traffic a little bit.
What traffic?
Everybody's favorite subject in Williamson County right now, or Middle Tennessee probably. And I think your Brentwood 2020 visioning project, or the last one was 2030?
Ended up, we changed it to 2030.
Okay, so, but the feedback there was that y'all needed to address the traffic issues as much as possible. Franklin Road is a mess right now. Kirk, tell us, offline a while ago, you were telling me a little bit about the challenges with the utility situation there on Franklin Road and what it's causing as far as timing on the...
Yeah, so the Franklin Road project from Concord Road south of Moore's Lane, a little bit into the city of Franklin, is a state project. We were involved on the front end with design and funding right-of-way acquisition, but the state is building it. Started, I think they broke ground in fall of 17. At that point, it was going to be a late 2020, mid 2021 type of a completion. Now we're at spring of 2022. And you know, we all understand it's frustrating in any city, and we got some folks here from the city of Franklin who have big projects going and have had one in the past. They don't always go according to plan and schedule. And utilities, and that's what a lot of people don't quite understand, is anything that's underground today or above ground today all has to be moved before you can even start building the actual road. And in the case of Franklin Road, you've got the obvious utilities of water, sewer, gas, electric, telephone, but you've also got multiple large fiber companies running north and south along Franklin Road. So in hindsight, I think everybody wishes there may have been a little better coordination on the utilities prior to construction starting. But what has happened is once they all got in a room together at the start of construction, they all realized that they were all eyeballing each other's same space of where they were going to move their stuff to. So as I was explaining today before, once you get in that situation, then it's a domino effect of you got to pick, okay, you go first, and then you figure out where that first one's going, and that determines where the next 8 are going, and then 2 decides, and that determines where the next 7 go. So it's not one of those where you can just pick it all at once and everybody does it. There's a time sequence. And AT&T is a big factor in here, and they're putting some of their stuff underground, and it just takes time. So despite what you see out there, if you drive that corridor, there's, other than some storm drain pipe, there's been very little true road work being done out there. It's still utility relocation, and the plan is in place, and everybody kind of knows where they're going now, and that's all happening, but it's probably at least put the project a minimum of a year behind.
Okay, so another two years.
Yeah, right now the substantial completion date, meaning that you've got kind of 5 lanes of traffic open, is late 2021, so about 2 years. Full completion of everything kind of cleaned up, dressed up and everything is, I think, spring of 2022. And when you're 2 years out in the middle of a road project, that schedule is still iffy, to be quite honest with you.
Mr. Mayor, how has the Hill Center affected traffic? Is it?
I don't think it's had a huge increase of traffic. I think in some ways it actually may help because people will actually go and park there and do 3 or 4 errands on these nice, beautiful fall days like we've had this week, rather than trip in here, trip in there, trip in there. So, and as it was studied, I will say this, it has also provided a destination for Brentwood citizens so that they go to a place in Brentwood, and so they're not traversing all the way across Brentwood to go to Cool Springs or into Green Hills or wherever. So in that sense, I think it helps. It's brought even a more, I don't even know how you'd put it, a larger sales tax base for the city. I think that's reflected in our budget. Our budget's $92 million this year, and a little inflated of what it would be if we weren't doing the police headquarters, because about $17 million is added in for that. But I've noticed we do pie charts to help make it a little easier to kind of see the statistics. But it used to be the other source and state shared revenues was about 30 to 31%, property tax for about 33, 34%, sales tax was about 33, 34%, and the numbers man here may correct me on this, but I was noticing this year's budget, sales tax was almost 38%. We still have a good blend of revenues. We don't depend just on one thing. As you said, people were fearful that Brentwood would totally depend on property taxes.
Right.
But the wisdom of those who came before me, that's not what happened. But I think City Park, a lot of the new businesses, especially the car dealerships and new businesses down on the south end, have helped us, which is good because as Middle Tennessee continues to grow, Brentwood's not going to grow a whole lot or real fast.
Right.
just because of the way we approve things and develop things. But as the rest of the area grows around us, I'm sure there'll probably be some challenges that it'll be nice having that. You were speaking of traffic, and many of y'all have probably heard me say this because many of you in the audience have known me for a while, but another historical fact, the mansion at Brentwood Country Club is called Midway. And at one time in the mid-1800s, a lot of times Brentwood was referred to as Midway because it's midway between everything in Middle Tennessee, it seems like. And a lot of our traffic, the parts that make it much busier, especially during rush hour, are actually people coming from Davidson County, Rutherford County, Wilson County, traversing the city, Murray County, southern Williamson County, Davidson County into Williamson County, or, you know. So a lot of our traffic, and you can tell when the schools are on break. I mean, even like when Rutherford County's children are on fall break and Williamson County aren't, you can tell a decrease in traffic. I live on the east end of Brentwood, and so I'm on Concord Road sometimes several times a day. And I started noticing, especially back when the economy was still going pretty good, but right before the economic collapse, that every day I didn't have a Williamson County tag in front of me. I had a Davidson County tag, or Rutherford County tag, or Wilson County tag. And so the old noggin started going, okay, there's a lot of pass-through traffic. And so, traffic's always an issue. And one other thing that some traffic things we control, and when we do projects, especially at intersections or entrances to interstates, or those types of things that help increase flow so that you don't get bottlenecks. Right. But most of our major thoroughfares, if you think about it, got Franklin Road, which is a U.S. highway and a state highway. So powers above us control it. Concord Road's a state route, and Wilson Pike's a state route. And those are, I would say, three of our major arteries. So we have no control. And then Old Hickory Boulevard is actually in Davidson County, but we have, partly due to our fiber optics network too, and hooked in, we've now have some input on the signalization along Old Hickory Boulevard, which we didn't for years, and that's something in the last 2 or 3 years, and I think that's a great cooperation with Metro Davidson County and being able to do that. So.
Right. Kirk, I've heard you talk a time or two about, of course, a lot of your traffic is trying to get to the I-65 interchange there on Old Hickory. And TDOT's got some fairly, I think, grandiose plans on how to deal with that intersection. What's the status of those? What's the vision there?
Yeah, as the mayor alluded to, probably now 3 years ago, we did a pretty comprehensive study in conjunction with Metro, looking at signal timing and operations, but also looking at longer term physical arrangement of that area. Because as you say, you've got Franklin Road, Old Hickory, and then right there is Old Hickory and I-65. You know, there's some physical constraints. If you ever look at that interchange on a map, it's not a 90-degree interchange. It's skewed largely because of one big rock in the southeast corner of that intersection. So ideally, we came up with a design that's a divergent diamond kind of thing that and I know is the design down in Spring Hill that we think, it's the left-turning traffic when you got to allow that left-turning traffic.
Like our McEwen here.
Yeah, that really kind of makes it difficult to run the signals efficiently. So that divergent diamond gets rid of that. The challenge is that big rock because you've got that exit coming off of there. So TDOT agrees that operationally that probably works, but physically they're not quite sure we can truly build it there. We proposed a few slip ramps, kind of on-ramps, you know, not a full interchange in a couple locations. Apparently the U.S. Federal Highway folks don't like those, so we're constrained. We don't have a firm plan for that. They've done some work on the northbound exit to go east on Old Hickory to extend some lanes and try to more of a safety thing. But long term, there's still not a definitive design plan for what that's going to look like.
Elon Musk has got a tunneling machine out in L.A. that he might loan you if you want to go through that rock. But
give you another little institutional fact. Probably late 70s, early 80s, they had looked at actually bringing an exit. It would have been an exit only west off 65. If you headed north down Franklin Road, you went past the Anglican church and you head up that hill. It was supposed to, the overpass was going to come kind of, and if you look at that cliff, it would have probably held it. And the westbound traffic for Old Hickory would have exited there onto Franklin Road, but I don't know. I think
About a mile north of the intersection. Then.
yeah, a lot of times economy goes a little south or different needs or whatever, and it kind of went by the wayside, but I think that would have helped back then.
That was one of the, in the plans, we had, one of the ideas was to have a southbound exit to Franklin Road there north of Old Hickory, an extra ramp there. And again, we were looking at one to go within our town center area. There's some area you can easily get on to go I-65 south and not have to go all the way up to Old Hickory Boulevard. But again, those little slip type things, other states have them, but TDOT's just not in favor of those here.
One more subject I want to touch on briefly, and then we're going to get out here in the audience a little bit and pick on a few people. But the Cal Turner property, that kind of is a settled issue in Mr. Turner's mind, it sounds like, for the time being.
Well, yeah, I will say that if you drive up Franklin Road, you do see development on the east side of Franklin Road there on a piece of property that some people may think is the Turner property, but it is not.
That was my question.
It's the Oman property that's being developed as a subdivision, 23 lots, 24 lots, something like that. So it's not, it was never part of the Turner property, or, I mean, it may have been years ago, but it wasn't Turner-owned land that was sold for that subdivision. It was owned separately and be developed as a gated, kind of high-end subdivision. I think the plat's been signed, several lots have been sold. 1 acre lots, I think the lots, 1 acre lot land is $700,000.
For the lot.
For the lot.
It's going to make the houses kind of expensive.
I saw you bought one though. I saw it in the.
No, you didn't. No, I bought a 150-acre farm down in Murray County. It didn't even cost that. So.
But as far as the Turner property itself, I mean, we meet occasionally with Mr. Turner, and he's a very gracious man. But at this point in time, there's nothing kind of in the works or the planning stages as far as we know. It's zoned for a neighborhood under our zoning, not surprisingly, and
right.
I think most people would prefer it, as I've told him. People prefer that it stay exactly the way it is, and he continue to pay to maintain it. So, and he is graciously willing to do that for a while. But at some point in time, there's a couple different parcels there that make up the whole farm, and some are in ownerships of trusts and that kind of stuff. So there'll be a point in time where it's not completely under his control in the future.
He is a gracious man. When the floods came a few years ago and kind of damaged his barn that had the nativity scene every year, he rebuilt it without the sides so it met all flood codes, but still so we could have that beautiful nativity scene on his barn, which has become a fixture of Brentwood. And that was graciousness on his part. So.
Right. I'll pick on Nelson Andrews a minute.
I'm a spectator, man.
Nelson, you are a newcomer to the City Commission.
Yes, sir.
And why did you decide to run for the City Commission? Is there anything about Brentwood you want to change, or is it because you wanted it to stay how it is? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, really, I ran because a couple of commissioners who I tremendously respected for their judgment and their contribution to the city, Betsy Cross and Jill Bergen, chose not to rerun. And as we were talking about folks that might be able to, lend their time and talent to the city, I realized I felt I had something to offer. I was encouraged by some friends and family to run, and really wanted to do what I could. I've lived in Brentwood almost my entire life. There's 3 generations of Andrews living in Brentwood right now. It's where we live, where we work, where my kids have been educated, where my parents live. And so I really thought it was something I could do and be a part of, and I've really enjoyed the work so far.
Anything you want to accomplish as a commissioner?
Well, as a commissioner, I'd like to see Brentwood continue to be the best place to live, work, and raise a family.
More of the same, just like it always has been.
Well, unless we come up with a better idea.
Yeah. Any questions from our audience this morning? Yes, sir. Just a moment. Identify yourself, sir, please.
I'm Barry Evans, a 25-year resident of Brentwood. When is the new police station scheduled to be finished and occupied, and what will happen with the room that will create in City Hall at that point?
So the project is underway. The grading, rough grading, is primarily done. The schedule would have it being done the first quarter of 2021, which is ironically the 50th anniversary of the formation of the police department, which was created in 1971. So we didn't plan that way either, but it'll be a nice way to put that together. As far as the space in City Hall, I don't know if any of you have ever been to our City Hall or walked through the hallways of it. That building was built in the mid-'80s, I think, by a developer, and part of it was occupied by the city, kind of the eastern end of it where the fire station is, and then the rest of it was lease space. I think that developer eventually went bankrupt. We acquired it all. It's really chopped up. There's no central corridors. There's no great thing. So we'll do some renovation in there over time. We'll expand a little bit. We'll end up with some extra space that's really not too functional in terms of city use, because the eastern half of the building is only accessible through the elevator. That's another kind of quirk here. So it's kind of hard to put a public service department where you got to send people through an elevator to get to them. So fire will take over some of what police has. Planning and codes, if anybody's ever been to our planning and codes department, they're on top of each other. So where police administration offices are now is next to planning and codes. They'll expand into there and give them some more space. But today, if I hired a new employee today that needed a desk in City Hall, we have no place to put them. So it'll allow us some growth space. Not that I see a lot of growth of administrative offices in City Hall, but it'll just allow us to be a little more efficient and utilize the space we have for the existing departments.
We have another question.
Comment. My name is Bob Wilkins. I'm with the United States Census Bureau. I just wanted to thank the city of Brentwood for communicating the Census Bureau message. You all have been very helpful. In fact, one of the most helpful organizations in the county. Thank you. You're helping us be successful, helping yourself get federal dollars back. So thank you, and we appreciate continued support.
Tell us how the volunteer effort's going for Williamson County.
We are continuing to look for applicants in Williamson County. We'll be hiring about 2,000 people in Middle Tennessee to support the 2020 census. And overall, we're doing pretty well. We're still not where we need to be. We are, again, actively working with anyone, any groups, individuals that will help communicate our message. But we're opening an office in Cool Springs where we'll be handling much of the administrative responsibilities. But we'll be having people out in the field in the coming weeks, continuing through 2020. So we need additional help. We need additional help to get that message out, and we're welcoming any support we can get. Thank you again, Jim.
Dave, let me add on to that. I can't overemphasize the importance of the 2020 census to the city of Brentwood and to the Williamson County as a whole in the state of Tennessee to get an accurate and full count, because a lot of our money that we get from the state is all per capita based. So we just did a special census that we're able to do, finished it in 2018, that got us up to 43,800 and something. There's a real potential that in the 2020 census, if we don't get a full count in Brentwood, that number could go down. So it's incredibly important to us, and again, and everybody in this county, that we get a full count and census. And we know this day and age, a lot of people are reluctant to share information with the government, but it's incredibly important for us as a community and as a county to get a full count in that 2020 census.
Time for one more question, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Mike Claudio, been in Brentwood about 8 years. So as the mayor pointed out, a lot of pass-through traffic. And as we've seen the growth of the county kind of move south and east, are there plans to improve the north-south roadways on that side of the county so that all of the traffic isn't moving to the west side of the county? And I know we've got Franklin Road, but Nolensville Pike, those other north-south avenues, are there any things in the works to move traffic, because people coming to Nashville can't live in Nashville, they're moving to Nolensville, and they're just having to have roads to come through. Is there anything in the works there?
So there is a plan, and again, Nolensville Road is obviously not in Brentwood, but there is a TDOT plan to widen Nolensville Road all the way, I think, from Old Hickory through Nolensville. I know there's some debate within Nolensville itself, exactly the route of that, because they want to preserve their historic little corridor there. There's talk of a bypass around that. But eventually, yeah, there's widening plans for Nolensville Road. But between Nolensville Road and I-65, there really is not another north-south type corridor. There's still talk of the McEwen Drive extension, that Franklin's working on to come out to Wilson Pike. From Wilson Pike further east is a joint project it's a little more important to us than I think to them, but we've got an agreement on how that would work. And that will come, within the next 5 years, that'll start. And there's discussions regionally between folks in Williamson County and Rutherford County of how that eventually uses some existing roads that are improved to carry you all the way over to Smyrna and I-24. But north-south roads, and that's our issue, and Dave cut me off if we're short, in Brentwood is we're bisected by an interstate highway that only has 3 ways across it. Church Street underneath, Concord Road across it, and Moore's Lane across it. So for us to facilitate east-west connectivity, you've got 3 routes, and all are state routes. Church Street, kind of an indirect state route because the state maintains that section of Church Street. And I can say this, the mayor maybe can't, that, there are decisions that were made by Brentwood decades ago that have kind of put in place some things for us that are great for neighborhoods, but are limiting in terms of connectivity. We don't have a lot of connectivity between neighborhoods. We've chosen not to extend some roads because of the neighborhood impact, or not widen roads as much as you might otherwise do, like Concord Road, because of the neighborhood impacts. And those are decisions made, I think, for good reasons, and we just have to realize that that's where we're left today.
I thought one of the audience would ask this question. Since you are about connectivity and transportation, that sort of thing, you banned scooters from the city. What? Why did you ban scooters?
I would just say, just take a walk downtown on any Saturday night, and longtime Predators fan, and it used to be really easy to walk to the arena without doing a kind of like a steeplechase cross-country sporting event, jumping, dodging, moving. I think they're fine for large urban areas that want them. The issue I find with them is the people who use them aren't wearing helmets. They're not on the roads. They're on the sidewalks. But I think the biggest problem is they're left everywhere. I think it's a housekeeping thing. And so Brentwood's really not even suited for scooter. If you think about our northern commercial area, it would be kind of catch, catch, catch. Now, for individuals who own their own scooters, there's no problem. So
That was supposed to be a quick question. Sorry, Mayor, but we are out of time, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to be with us. It's always enlightening to get our neighbors in here and find out more about what's going on in their particular community. And I live in Franklin, but I still am interested in what's going on up north of us, and we appreciate you coming down here and sharing that with us. Really appreciate our sponsors that help make this happen. Lynn Maddox, Christine Bradley from Vanderbilt, that are always so supportive. AT&T and Tom Lawrence and Creed Henderson from WCTV and WAKM. Really appreciate y'all helping make this happen. Our chamber staff is also involved in it. And Community Coffee, make sure we have caffeine here every month. So just appreciate you all being here. Hope you'll come back. We have an interesting program, I think, in the works for next month, and look forward to having you back with us. Thank you very much.